What's up YouTube, Capital G here. We're talking Kozmos in this video, and we are asking the simple question, has Kozmos arrived as a deck? And when I say arrived, I don't want anybody saying, oh, you idiots. Of course, they're a good deck. Everybody acknowledges that. When I say arrived, I'm talking about, are they now one of the heavyweight contenders to win a YCS? Are they now one of those decks where you can't take lightly anymore? You're like, okay, going into this event, I know I got a plan for Kozmos because they're one of the best decks of the format. Would you now put them on, like, would you put them in that tier? I guess, are they now looked at differently by the masses? And the reason I'm asking this is because going into this format, I talked about Kozmos a lot. I did a boom or bust on Kozmos. I said that they were an obvious boom. I put them in the top 10 on my Yu-Gi-Oh hierarchy, even when Jeff Jones topped the ARG Metro event, which, if you want to take that with a grain of salt, I am completely with you, because he has shown in the past that, you know, he'll play anything at those Metro events and usually do well because they're really not that big. Remember the time that he topped with Fire Fist, and then that deck, you know, got a lot of hype, and then it kind of fell off the end of the earth. So I completely understand the people who were being kind of skeptic, but there was a lot of backlash. There were people saying, oh, the deck is overhyped. Remember when Farm Girl jumped in price and people said, oh, that's just hype, it's not even that good of a deck? And I really never changed my position. I was like, yeah, you know, Farm Girl's expensive, but like, deal with it because the deck's fucking amazing. And I never really came and changed my position on the deck. I mean, mainly this didn't come from anything anybody told me. It came from me firsthand playing against the deck on stream. You know, I really didn't think that there was another deck out there that could put this much pressure on you with one card in the battle phase. You know, one Farm Girl turns into 4,300 damage, and, you know, potentially having your own little Leo that when it dies, it just replaces itself anyway. You know, this one card, Cosmotown, does so much for this deck. It lets you fix your hands, and they let you get free pluses from your banish zone. And it also just, if it happens to be destroyed, then it just gets another copy. Like, you pretty much can never MST this card, like, if you're the opposing player. I mean, I guess you can, but like, why? You know what I mean? The only thing that I really worried about was, could the deck play enough defensive cards? And then you saw people implement Maxi and Honest and Gores and whatnot. This is actually a version that topped a regional over the weekend. He actually decided to run a whole bunch of traps, which I think if you're running traps in this deck, I think you kind of fix the one little, like, you fix the one gaping hole that the deck has. And the thing about this weekend is, and why I feel like this is a good time to ask this question, is this was a really big weekend for Yu-Gi-Oh! We had two YCSs. We had YCS Romini, and we had YCS Toronto. We had about 5 different regionals, and I've just been looking over the results of these events, and Kozmos really showed out. Kozmos took a top 8 spot in YCS Romini. They had a top 32 spot in YCS Toronto. They won a regional in Atlanta. They actually got 2 spots in top 8. They took another 2 spots in a regional in Utah. They took a top 8 spot in this regional in Kansas, the one that Asian Persuasion was at. And obviously you see this deck, and I think that the deck is now distinguishing itself. Like, I think it has surpassed decks like Sir Tellarknights and even Cleafort, and now I think it's, you know, kind of up there with Burning Abyss and Necros and all Necros' little crazy variants. And I think it's because the deck can do so much offensively. And if you're relying on, you know, like brute force, you're probably not going to beat this deck. Like, usually brute force requires you to, you know, be able to summon really big beaters and just run over your opponent's monsters. But when they have Maxi to kind of say, all right, if you want to special summon, we're going to draw 50 cards, and things like Honest and Jurigato to make sure that if you try and go Maxi challenge, they're not going to die. I think that kind of covers up that deficiency that the deck has. Also, the deck has a really good matchup against Cleafort. You're starting to see people implement things like Thunder King Ryo against the deck. Thunder King Ryo just being really good against Necros and Cleafort in general. It says no to Summoner's Art, no to Cleafort, Cleafort Scout, which is pretty much the entire deck in a nutshell. And then also, if you're running the Cleafort Towers variant, like the Turbo Towers, it just does really bad against this deck, because Cyber Dragon is a thing. They can summon Cyber Dragon. They can instantly send your towers that you work so hard to the graveyard. And generally, I mean, if your towers dies, you're probably going to lose the game. But they can send that straight to the graveyard. They can summon Chimera Tech, and then it's just like you kind of lose. So I'm looking at this deck, and I'm thinking it's probably going to now have to be a deck that people start respecting, which it's funny because I said in a video before that the same cards that kind of beat Ritual Beast beat this deck too. Well, nah, I guess in in theory, because things like, you know, Imperial Iron Wall, or those cards could work really well against this deck. I think that that's probably like the biggest one that would really hurt this deck. But this is really just a discussion for anybody out there who was like, Kozmos isn't really that good. How do you perceive the deck now? Because I now see it as probably about the third to fourth best deck currently in the game. And I think that, you know, the Burning Abyss matchup was probably going to be the biggest struggle, because I think that clearing Dante's is going to be an issue for this deck. Like, I don't really look at this deck and think that there are a lot of inherent ways to get rid of Dante, but at the same time, I think that Forerunner is probably a problem for Burning Abyss. I mean, they pretty much have to rely on making like Acid Golem or something like that. And if Acid Golem dies, then you literally could just sit on a Forerunner and you could just constantly attack, because Burning Abyss aren't built to they're not built to deal with like a card like Leo. They're not equipped to deal with that. So let me know what you guys think. And also, do you think that the hype was justified? Like, so far from what Kozmos have done in the little time that they've been like legal, do you feel like they've been vindicated now? You know, these crazy price spikes of Farm Girl and Emergency Teleport, which is still, even though it's getting reprinted, like, it's still really expensive of a card. So do you think that the hype has actually been justified? Thank you guys for watching as always.